Football made simple. Become great at your craft by finding ways to make it simple for those around you. This is the Coaching 101 podcast hosted by Find a Way Productions with your co-host Daniel Chamberlain and Kenny Simpson. Welcome back, coaches. This is the Coaching 101 podcast. I am Daniel Chamberlain here with Kenny Simpson. Coach, how's that cool weather in Northeast Arkansas today?
It's good. It's good. Feel like every show we start off talking about the weather, but I guess as a coach, you're in it every day. So you just kind of think about it, but it's hoodie weather out here, and it's, we're 6 weeks into the season now, and kind of the hunt for the playoffs are going. We talked last week a little bit about that tiredness you go, and that's kind of that's where you just wake up feeling tired, and you're not going to not be tired until the season is over. At some point you kind of become numb to it. That's around this point of the season. Usually for me is I'm just kind of, my body is adapted to the fact that I'm not going to have as much sleep as I would like to. And it's just going to be how it is until the season's over, and you might as well enjoy the ride, because it's going to be over pretty quick. Depending on where you are, it may be already be, if you're listening to this podcast, it may be already over for you.
Right.
And then with what I do, it's clinic season's down the road. Most coaches aren't probably thinking a lot about it, but I've got to think about it now because I have to book sites and I have to, reserve different things. So that's kind of hitting me a little bit. And the 5 minutes of off time I have, I try to kind of work through that stuff. So I've got all my clinic sites lined up, and, I know we're looking at going to AFCA as a staff. So coaches are already kind of thinking about not just this season, what the off season is going to look like. And it's just a lot going on, Daniel. So
there is.
The long answer for the short question you asked.
No, that's okay. You're right, man. The season is kind of coming down, and everybody's in different places, right? And some people are, what we call salvaging their season now, or looking at it if it's not already over. By the time this comes out, my freshman games, I think, will be over. And so then we all just transfer over to be varsity staff. So it just kind of depends on how that goes. Seems like it's, you never know. 6A ball is so crazy. I know in 3A and 2A and 1A, where I've spent my career, you kind of know who the top dogs are. And if you're kind of in a rebuilding year, especially if you're at a new school, it's probably not because they were super successful. So, but 6A, man, anybody can beat anybody every night. And even the perennial, doormats are like knocking off teams this year. And we're just like, what is going on? So we have no idea. We have no idea what the future holds. So it's really good. It makes it, that parity is a lot better.
Arkansas is very top heavy, it's even at the upper classes where you've got 2 or 3 that are, unless the wheels fall off, they're probably going to end up at the end. And then you kind of have that in the hunt group, and the in the hunt group seems to be larger this year than on most years when you're looking at our level of football, 5As, 4A, 3A, kind of that mid-tier level of football in Arkansas. I feel like there's 1 or 2 dominant teams, and then there's probably 10 teams or so in each one that would legitimately if they got hot, could make it. So if your team's in it, and we hope we're one of those teams that's in it, you never know. You got to catch kind of lightning in the bottle. There's a lot of work to be done, obviously for a lot of teams. But when the weather gets cold, the games matter a lot more.
Yeah, I know you talked about being tired a minute ago, and we did last week as well. This week I had to take I was just legitimately sick. My son's caught some allergy stuff going on, and it brought me down too. And I'm not the only member on our staff that's taking like a personal day just to rest. I mean, they still go to practice or the game or whatever that day, but man, just taking a rest day is wonderful. It's a very good idea. I know the principals and superintendents probably be mad at you because they need somebody in the classroom, but I don't know, man. I think the quality of work you get out of people is much higher if they aren't, if they can get that 1 day of rest in. So
we're lucky our school's gone to, there's a lot of those 4-day weeks, which kind of stinks for coaches because you got to get all your players up there and they're not in school, they're out of schedule. But as a coach, those are good days to kind of catch up on stuff and relax a little bit before it hits.
Yeah, for sure. Well, tonight we came to talk about layering blitzes, and this is an episode that when you brought up the title of it and the topic, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks ago, I was very excited because Obviously, I just started in 3-4 system this year, and in the 4-2-5, there's some layering you can do, but it's a pretty base setup. You can run your base stuff a lot, and 3-4, you're constantly having to send someone. So I'm pumped because I've kind of fallen for the 3-4 system. It's a lot of fun to coach. There's not a lot of time just sitting on the sidelines, just going, "Yep, just run what we run." So I'm anxious to see where this episode goes tonight. Before we get started, Coach, how about you share some other ways we can make things simple for our staff and our athletes?
Coaching 101 podcast is sponsored by Findaway Productions. Findaway Productions also sponsors fbcoachsimpson.com for all your coaching needs, with over 30 coaching materials, books, as well as 50 PowerPoints and videos and smaller materials, and the free magazine headsets. Findaway Productions also sponsors offensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things offense, and defensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things defense.
This episode is brought to you by Athletic Speed and Movement. At athleticspeedmovement.com, we've taken Del Basquet's 45 years of speed and movement training and put it all in one place just for you. You can get the same training that NFL players have been getting for years, collegiate players have been getting for years, and now high schools across the nation are paying thousands of dollars to bring Del in to install his system, but we've got it online for you. It's time to help your team become faster, not just in the 40, not just their sprint speed, but between the tackles and their cuts while they're chasing down the quarterback. It's time for you to help them become faster everywhere. Jump over to athleticspeedmovement.com. There's an orange button there. Just click it. It says, get the keys to playing faster. You'll get the 3 core movement video from Dell. He's explaining the science behind it, all for just the price of your email. Check it out, athleticspeedmovement.com. Awesome. Good stuff, Coach. All right, man. So let's jump right into the questions. What do you define as a blitz?
Well, there's a lot of ways to define blitzes. There are 2 different big terms I think of. One is a stunt, and then one is a blitz. So like, to me, a stunt just requires you moving a player unexpectedly, generally a guy who's already on the line of scrimmage. So you can stunt like a nose tackle and have him go B gap, like long stick almost, and run like a twist. You can twist your defensive line. That's not really a blitz, because although you're bringing them unexpectedly and a stunt is a good thing, you're not really bringing additional players. You're simply, and it might even just be moving them to the right, like one gap over, just calling like a rip or a Liz or a pinch call or whatever. That's a stunt. And so that can be part of a blitz. But when I think of a blitz, I think of bringing a second level kind of player. So I'm thinking of bringing an additional guy who is not really expected to blitz coming, which is usually a linebacker, although depending on your system, it could be a DB. But generally, it's somebody who's coming unexpectedly. We talk to our football kids a lot. A lot of football terms, for whatever reason, right, wrong, or different, are military terms.
Yeah.
So blitz comes from World War II, blitzkrieg or lightning war, which is bringing war unexpectedly in unexpected places. So kind of think of it that way. If you're coaching, is how can I bring a guy who's not expected to come and not expected to come in this gap or whatever it's going to be. So generally that's going to be a second or a third level player. And then a lot of times this will be paired with a stunt. So, a general blitz might be like Mike Fire that's talking to our Mike linebacker. Fire tells him he's going through an inside gap. And so he's going to come through an inside gap. And then we might pair that with some kind of stunt with our defensive line. Or we might run like what we call Mike X, where him and the nose tackle are going to run an X blitz. So a lot of times you can pair those together. I know we're going to talk later on about how you start to kind of layer those.
Right.
When you're simply defining a blitz, that's kind of what I would define it as. Usually the blitzing player, and I know this is not one of our questions, but a lot of times we work on like who's blitzing and where they're going, but we don't really work on how to blitz.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times we send a guy and we get mad because he either runs up there way too early and they figure it out and pick him up, or he's unblocked and doesn't make a play. And a lot of times that happens a lot at the high school level, younger level, of course. So teaching how to blitz is just as important as teaching like where you blitz. So generally when we're talking to a kid, when they're blitzing, If they're coming inside gap, we say you have an inside gap right here. You are filling this inside gap. Then play your rule the same. So if I'm stunning through the A gap and the guard pulls, what would I normally do on that? And you have to kind of work through those scenarios with them. Or another common blitz, we bring a guy off the edge and the quarterback gets outside and we get mad at him. We'll got to teach them, where is your aiming point when you're coming off the edge? Where are you going? You're going to the deepest hip in the backfield. So you are blitzing, but you are blitzing kind of like a contain type player. And so I know that wasn't the question on this, but I do think it's kind of a little caveat we need to hit in here, is not just teaching, hey, this guy blitzes or that guy blitzes, or here's where I want you to blitz, but teaching them how they're supposed to blitz and then the purpose of them blitzing, what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. So, like I said, I just kind of started in the 3-4. And so I'm pretty excited about this episode. And that's something I've had to pick up on this year is, in a 3-4, you essentially have to send a fourth person, or the fourth person comes from a different place every play. Or, it's strong side, weak side, field, boundary. Maybe you're sending somebody up the middle. I'm not a big middle backer blitzer. I want them to read their key reads and make sure they're on the right side of the football, as the play is developing. But it took me a while to get used to, I'm sending my outside backer, but he's really just the fourth defensive lineman, because I'm going to build a front, whether it's an over front, an under front, whatever it is that I'm wanting to build on that play. And so my blitzes are even this year are different than they have in previous years. Yes, in previous years, they're the fifth guy, right? I'm sending 5 to try to disrupt the run, throw off the timing of the pass, move the quarterback, or squeeze him. If he's someone that steps up in the pocket, maybe I'm pushing him up into my D line because I've got a stunt on and I'm taking away where I think he wants to go, whatever it is. So this year it's been different because now I have to send 2 guys if I want to accomplish that, because my first blitz is just an additional lineman kind of. And so he is the one that, I send him and I always keep him real tight to the line. And I'm not so worried about him keeping quarterback contained, because he better have a new safety roll down at his spot, being that contained guy. So it's just been a lot of fun learning how to run it separately from the 4-2-5, which has always been my bread and butter. So.
And you can do it in both. So if you're listening to this, guys, and you run a 4, you can blitz in a 4 front. It's obviously a little more risky. If you blitz in a 3 front, like Daniel's talking about here, you're really just kind of getting an extra guy going. So it just depends on your philosophy, kind of where you're going. We're going to talk about layering and making it more expensive and kind of how to do more than just one. But I think it's important. Too many times coaches, they get the cart before the horse and they jump on all these exotic blitzes and they don't really spend time teaching the fundamentals of how to blitz. Once you teach that, it's going to make your blitz game a lot better. And a lot of times we just jump right into, you're blitzing off the edge, or you're blitzing here, or you're doing this. We don't really teach them how or the purpose of it. And then we do a lot of this where we walk through, our whole team watches. So like our Mike knows the other guy's blitzes. He only has to know his for him, but we want him to know when other guys are stunting, because as we start to layer our blitzes, when we're going to run edge blitzes with our Mike and our defense. So he needs to understand when we run an edge blitz, what that means. And we're going to run a fire blitz, or we're going to bring an outside linebacker on a twist inside. So he needs to understand what that means. So a lot of times when you're teaching this, you need to teach it with them all there so they can kind of get the fundamental of it.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I think that pushes us to our second question here and kind of getting the meat potatoes. So how do you begin to build out your blitz package?
Well, for us, and again, there's lots of ways people can do this. For us, of course, we run the 3-4. If you're interested in the 3-4 swarm, I've got the whole system over at FB Coach Simpson where you can get all of this in the books and all that stuff. But basically, we will name each of our positions. So common names you'll hear, like Mike and Sam, and different names you're going to hear for your guys. And then we're going to have words that talk about where we're blitzing. So in our system now, and it's kind of evolved as we grow, but fire is an inside stunt, and then edge is an outside stunt, because those are just easy words to know. So we could tag Mike, the middle linebacker, or for us is really kind of our weak side linebacker, but we just call him Mike, edge, and he knows I'm coming off of the edge. We could say Mike fire, and he understands that's whatever gap I was supposed to be responsible for with the front. So if we were running like a rip call, everybody's going right, it might be backside A gap. Okay, we're running like a loop call or whatever, it might be the B gap. So he needs to know when we call fire, this is the gap you're responsible for where you're going. And then we'll do the same thing with our Sam and with our Will and with our other outside linebacker. And so all of them will kind of learn this is what a fire looks like, an inside blitz. This is what an edge looks like, and here's how we're going to teach it. So at any point, we could call any of those 4 guys' names and send them. Usually for us, because we're high school level, we might send one DB. And so he might be involved in that, maybe a roll down safety. We might bring an extra guy. So he might need to know, but most of our other DBs, they're kind of away from this. Usually we're working different coverage concepts that would match or pair with that, because I think you need to think about where the holes are. So if I'm going to bring an outside linebacker off the edge, what's to stop them from throwing a curl route right there or a shoot route or whatever? So a lot of times, you've got to make sure that you have coverages that might be able to pair with that. So an easy one in a 3-4 would be to bring an outside linebacker and roll a safety down to fill a spot. That's an easy kind of pairing. Then we look at making sure we're gap sound. We can't be blitzing guys through the same gap. We can't be trying to bring 2 guys through one gap, or we can't be having uncovered gaps. So we got to make sure that in our own system, and this is not so much on the kids, but it's more on the coach, that we're sound in what we're doing. I've got zero problem bringing pressure. I think you have to in today's game, but I do not like bringing unsound pressure where, let's say they have a tight end and we're going to blitz our Sam through B gap and have C gap uncovered. Who has that? We either have to roll a DB down to fill that, or we got to do something so that gap is covered. And so that's things you've got to think about when you're going to blitz is, how does this look like? Everyone draws up 2x2 and all their blitzes. And they all look great against 2x2s. They have 5 linemen. What if they have a tight end? Now what do your blitzes look like? What if they have 2 tight ends? What if they have 2 tight ends on the same side? How is that going to go? Are you going to teach a peel? So you're going to bring your outside backer, but he's technically responsible for back if he leaks? Or are you not going to have a peel? So there's easy ways to teach that. We teach our outside linebacker that you're going, and if we just tell you you're going, you have whatever the deepest hip in the backfield is. So if the back leaks out, that's you, because that's the deepest hip. You got to go get it. Then we have a call for them called crash, which lets them know I'm going, I have no coverage. So you got to think about all of these things as you're building in your blitzes. So we usually, with this one blitzer, it'll be his name and whatever the blitz is. And I just gave you about 3 or 4 different options there. So each kid learns 3 or 4. So that sounds like a lot, but really they only learn 3 or 4. Then as we start to kind of, layer it up, and I'll get to that later on, we usually will work on names. Well, we want them all to learn this because we want to be able to send different pressure from different players to the same place.
Right.
So if we're bringing our mic and the guard's picking him up, what happens if we brought our outside linebacker on a twist stunt and brought him inside? He might not be accounted for in their blocking scheme. And so we can do that. Or maybe they're not really picking up edge pressure well, but we don't want to leave our outside backer because that hole in the zone will be wide open. So we want to be able to bring our mic off the edge. So learning the ability to bring different players in the same gaps is important. We're still plugging the same gaps, but can your kids handle, as you slowly layer it up, well, they start to realize where their responsibility becomes. So here's an example. You're going to bring an outside backer and you're going to pinch your defensive line inside to slam down BC gap. Well, your mic probably needs to know, if I'm calling that, I need to widen out because we're covering up BC gap. So if I'm making a tackle, it's probably going to be scraping outside. So there are different things that they need to kind of work, how all of this pairs up. Again, it's easy to draw it up. It's easy to walk through it. Do your kids understand the repercussions of what they're doing and how that's going to work together? And I think that's where good blitzing teams come, is their kids are able to understand how to adjust to it and make it work.
Oh, for sure. I really like what you're talking about when you just, start with your base blitzes, because everybody needs to know how to send. I mean, realistically, you should be able to send all 11 kids, right? At any point. We even drew up a corner blitz this year. I'm a big cover 3 guy when we blitz. We play a lot of read 2. So we're going to be read 2 for our base, and then we'll switch into some man and some off coverage. and we're going to cover 3 whenever we blitz, just because I think it gets you the most sound coverage. I can keep all my gaps filled. I know a lot of people do different stuff. Some people want to go cover 0. We probably could have done that a little bit as well. But what we were doing worked okay. So the ability to give a person a blitz, and then, like you said, you start giving names. Now you're pairing them up, and then all of a sudden you've got whatever your very exotics are. The naming, I think, really does keep it simple. We even put like letters of their positions in their names for their blitzes, so that helps them to an extent. I always try to coach my stuff thinking about like the 3rd or 4th string walking in, because I legitimately have to coach 2 teams and they get the same practice time. So it's not, I can't divide the practice into the kids that understand and the kids that don't. So we got to keep it as simple as possible. So, but no, I like the way you said you build those up. So how do we become more exotic? So we talked about, talking about layering. So how do we do that? How do we become more exotic after we've got that base stuff installed?
Yeah, so the first thing we did was, all we've done now is we've taught the basics of how to blitz, and then we've given however many guys we want the ability to blitz, their words, and then where they might blitz from. So you start thinking about that. Well, let's say we just did linebackers. We have 4 linebackers in our defense. Maybe you have 3 or 4 in yours. If 4 guys have 3 different blitzes, that's 12 different looks. Start kind of doing the math on that. We can move our front, we can stunt our front, and now we've got maybe 36 different looks we can give an offense. That's just bringing one guy. Okay, so then we start looking at, okay, before I get into more blitzes, how can we hide it? How can we simulate pressure? Because I'm a big fan of, at the high school level, and you saw at the college level, Miami did it 2 years ago when Flores had them, when they would simulate pressure it looked like cover 0 every single play, which I think was a little bit over the top, but the ability to simulate pressure can be just as effective as bringing pressure. So a lot of people will refer to that as like creepers or stemmers, or, guys that are going to show something and get out of it. So like in our defense, we have words that talk to our guys on, we want to simulate pressure and we want to drop, and then we want to simulate pressure, and then these guys are coming and these guys are dropping. So the ability to kind of hide what you're doing is important as you're layering. So we have words that kind of talk to them of, hey, show the blitz. And then when we don't give that cue, then obviously we're not wanting to show the blitz. We're wanting to hide it till the last minute. And so that's one way you can do it, is creepers, stemmers, stunners, all that kind of stuff. The other thing we'll do is we'll run what we call twists. Okay, so twists are it's an easy one to do, but not enough coaches do it. And so, like for us, we can twist our defensive end and our outside linebacker, which you would think would be an easy pickup, but it's really not once you start pairing it with like a creeper look. So like a call in our defense, I think they call it buckle, and that just means for our guys, they were all walked up like we're going. And then they'll call whatever the call is. So let's say you said buckle, and then you said like strong twist. So that means the 2 inside backers are going to walk up in the B gaps, and then they're going to creep back to where they are before the snap or on the snap. So the guards have got to account for them because they've walked up like they're blitzing. And then now that poor tackle over there has a twist run on him, or we're taking our D in and going outside and bringing a guy who wasn't walked up, and he's coming B gap. So all that is for us is one blitz with a tag of a simulation. And so now you've kind of made it look like a different level for those kids. Then we can do the same thing where we're going to bring more than one player. We usually have a different name for it. So one player, we just give the guy's name and what he's doing. Multiple players, we usually will come up with names. So we've got about 5 or 6 different common blitzes that we run, where we're going to bring like a common one, but we'll bring both outside linebackers are coming. So we'll come up with a name for that one for this year. These 2 outside linebackers are coming. And so we just call that, they know they're both coming. But then we can pair that with that buckle call. So now our inside linebackers are walked up. They're not coming, but the outside linebackers are coming. Okay. Or we can run like both inside linebackers are coming and they're running a little twist game, like a nose X or Mike X or whatever we're calling. We can run that from normal. We can run it from when they're all walked up. And so now you're starting to give different looks to an offense. I want to give a little kind of code on this. Like there are certain games when we break down an opponent, I just left our field house. We break down an opponent. There are some games where it's a spread team. They're going to be throwing the ball quite a bit. They're 10 personnel a lot. We're probably going to have a lot of our blitz package in. Like that's going to be in the game plan that we're going to run this a lot. Then we just got done playing a team, I think it was a couple weeks ago, that ran, I don't think they had a receiver on the field. It was tight end and H-back and two backs in the backfield. We still have some blitzes that we will run in that, but they're very different. And so that's why it's important to kind of have these multiple blitzes on the front end. If you're listening to this now, I'm talking about next off season. I don't go in now and try to build all this blitz package, but hopefully it'll give you some, something pretty easy. So some weeks we don't have a huge blitz package, and some weeks it's all out there. And so understand as you get more exotic, your kids have still got to understand the basic things. Like I'm still blitzing, I'm still going to this gap, and this is how I want you to get to this gap and what your responsibilities once you get into that gap. So they've got to understand different things. We're big on having our defensive linemen a lot of times understand, like on twist, like here's a how. If we're running twist and the D end is going outside, we want him to grab the tackle and turn him. So when our twister comes, he's going to have a gap to run through. So that's a how. Don't just fly outside. Like grab the guy and open it for us. And then here we come. It's something on like a nose X. Grab the guard in the center and turn him. So when we bring that linebacker, he's free. So understanding that kind of stuff, it goes back to that. And the last thing I'd say is like we do a lot of, so if you're going to do a lot of simulators, creepers, whatever you want to call them, okay, we want to be able to move our front guys back. So again, that depends on what level you're playing. If you're in here playing 2A football, or you're coaching 12-year-olds, or whatever it is, you probably don't need to run a lot of zone blitzes. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. There are some teams on our schedule that it wouldn't make zero sense for us to run that against. But there's 3 or 4 teams that we have to beat to get where we want to get, that we need to have this kind of stuff in. And so we will take some stuff where we'll drop a nose back and bring the mic, or we'll walk up and the DN will bail out because we know they like to throw this hot route or whatever they're trying to throw. So the ability to take a D lineman and either send him outside as a contained guy or drop him into coverage is big for us. So if you're an offensive coordinator, I walk a bunch of dudes up to the line of scrimmage, you're probably checking screen. So we want the ability to walk up and then bring them off. So the ability to kind of move back and forth is big. The ability to move different guys there. And then one big thing that we try to do on defense, like we do on offense, is like we call it a switch call. So this is the way we teach our blitzes. So we're saying, all right, we're going to bring, Mike edge. Well, this week, maybe our strong safety's rolled down there. So, hey, we want to run edge, but we want to run it with you. So again, that kind of goes back to that, bringing pressure in the same place, but with a different guy. Because I would imagine most teams are not accounting for a safety fitting C gap on a blitz. He's probably going to come unblocked. So that's kind of how if you're looking at layering blitzes. So you start off with the base. You start off with, we're going to teach each person how to do it. Then you kind of progress to, okay, now we want to give you 3 or 4 different blitzes you can do. Then now we're going to pair it with, now we have these 4 to 5 blitzes where we're bringing multiple players, and we have a word to bring these 2 players or these 3 players or these however many players you're bringing. And then we want to be able to tag it with, are we showing it or not showing it? So that gives you a lot of looks. You went from 12 blitzes to 36 blitzes to with the simulations and the twists and whatever. Now you're around 100 blitzes, but your kids learned 3 things.
Right.
They learned where to blitz, what to do when I do blitz, and then am I showing it or not showing it? And that's all they have to know, so they can play pretty free.
I know you talk about things being expensive and when do you call something exotic? I don't know. There's a number of guys moving that make something exotic, right? You talk about a Mike knows X. That's not too exotic. You're not really any risk there to lose control of either A gap, right? So I generally start thinking when someone has to learn something that they wouldn't have done in their base read anyway. So, the nose is going to play base to the other side even when you cross him. So he's not learning anything new. But when you start talking about long sticks, when you start talking about DNs dropping into coverage, if you're sending a guy that is super risky, sending a corner, right? That's pretty risky. That's a risky move. You got to make sure you got whatever you're trying to do covered. So that's when I kind of think that I call them exotic, more than like probably two guys on the move and then pairing that front and back together. And when it's somebody that's just can make you unsound. So I have a question about exotic blitzes. Is there ever a time that you just make the call to be unsound, whether it's gap soundness, numbers, whatever, because you're just wanting to overload a section? I think they're going off tackle here. I'm going to completely overload it, understanding my, the boundary or whatever is going to be a little undermanned here.
Yeah, I think that's a little different what you're saying there. So you're not gap unsound, but like you may recognize, man, if they throw a hot route right here, we're gonna have to have safety rally down and tackle in. Like to me, I'm not ever going to be unsound in my gaps, but I may send pressure knowing I'm leaving holes in the zone behind it. Like I'm not a big man zero guy. That's just not my cup of tea. I'm not a big fan of that. I would rather keep a DB back there because if they want to throw hot or throw a screen or whatever, maybe he'll make a tackle. And that can be unsound because they throw a tunnel screen and you brought the house. I mean, you kind of get where you get. I'd leave a little caveat on that is, usually if we're doing really well defensively, we're not going to be into just a bunch of exotics. I think sometimes guys like to be exotic because I don't know if they think that maybe that makes them playing a bigger role in the game. If that makes sense to you. Like if we're stuffing you in our base, we're going to call base. And the same thing way I call offense. If we're running buck and you're not stopping it, I'm not calling another play to look cool. Like I'm just going to keep calling that play. So if we're calling base and you're getting 2 yards and we're getting pressure with 3, man, I'm not going to just call a blitz just to show a blitz. A lot of times ours, and kind of going more to your question, a lot of times ours is game plan too. Like we kind of look at 3rd down, they're on the hash, they have trips to the field. Man, they've shown they like to roll out. We're going to bring Mike X right here, and so that's not like, what if they run draw? Well, we just took our mic and ran them off the edge, and so we're not unsound there, but we're not very sound, but we're playing the percentages there, if that makes sense to you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, Coach, you got any more piece of advice for blitzing and layering your blitzes here?
Again, focus on teaching how to do it. Make sure each kid knows what they're doing before you start progressing into what I call fun stuff. And then when you get in a game, call blitzes for a purpose. Like call a blitz for a purpose. They're gutting us right now on C gap, or they're gutting us inside, or they're gutting us whatever. Or here's another one. You're working with the 3rd team, 9th grade JV linebacker, Daniel, and he ain't moving forward because he can't read a key. Send him. So those are the kind of reasons we usually are blitzing.
Yeah. Sending. That was like, I feel like my entire first year of DC, which was my first year of coaching, weirdly enough. But yes, backers who wouldn't move out of their concrete. They were in quicksand and they weren't going anywhere. So just had to fire them up. But awesome, Coach. Well, that's good. That brings us to our last part here and what not to do as a coach. So why don't you go ahead and give us our lesson for the day?
Sure. I'm a big guy of simple. And so that's what our whole podcast is kind of based off of. That's what my offense is based off of. If you decide you want to get the 3-4 swarm defense, that's what it's based off of, is keeping things simple. However, today's lesson as a coach is don't limit yourself defensively. A lot of times defensive coaches want to be really good at their base, and they should, 1000% should be really good at your base. However, there will come a time when they're better than you. And so what are you going to dig into in your bag of tricks to stop them? And if you don't have a more expensive blitz package than you probably think you need, it's really hard to come up with one on the spot. But if you have a bunch of tools that you can go to, it'll give you a chance. So think about it offensively. Okay. We spend all Sunday afternoons working on what happens on 3rd and 8 in our offense, because that's the down we don't like. So I spend about all that time coming up with, well, we have to throw it because we can't run it. Here's our 7-8 shot plays or whatever we're going to come up with. And then I hope I never have to use those in a game. Like last Friday, didn't have to use any of them because they were doing well. 2 Fridays ago, we threw for more than we ran for because we couldn't run the ball. They just loaded it up in there, and we needed those shot plays because they were good. And so that's going to happen to you on defense. There's going to come a time where you're stuffing your base and you don't need those blitzes. That's awesome. But there will come a time where you're not getting pressure with 3, or they're getting 8 yards of carry, and you got to do something. So make sure that your blitz package is good enough where you have tools you can give your kids to at least give them a chance. Can't stop everybody, but at least give them a chance. Don't limit yourself because you think, well, I don't know if our kids can do all of this, or we only play 2 spread teams a year. I don't know how it is in Oklahoma, but in Arkansas, generally the teams that are playing for the state championship, 90% of them at the higher levels are running spread. And so you better figure out a way to stop that offense if you want to get where you want to get.
Yeah, that makes sense. Appreciate it, Coach. Well, we will get out of here with our social media. You can find me on Twitter at Coach Chambo OK, or X, whatever it's called now. Chamberlain Football Consulting at gmail.com is my email. Where can we find you, Coach?
All things FB Coach Simpson. So websites, fbcoachsimpson.com, all kinds of stuff over there. FB Coach Simpson at Twitter/X, whatever that is. And then FB Coach Simpson at gmail.com. And then you can find me in all the Facebook groups as well.
Awesome. The podcast is at Coaching 101 Pod on Twitter/X. We want to thank you for being a listener to the Coaching 101 podcast. We hope you'll join us next week as we continue to make the complex more simple. Please consider subscribing to the show so you'll always know when the new episodes are out. We'll leave you with this. It's hard to beat someone who never gives up. No matter the situation, find a way.